Every war begins with a story. Some are told to protect nations. Others are told to persuade the world. Tonight, we uncover a war that began not with certainty, but with a lie. This is Truth with Smith.
In March 2003, the world watched as a massive military coalition led by the United States invaded Iraq, launching a war that would reshape the Middle East and define an entire generation. The justification sounded urgent and absolute. Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, chemical and biological arms so dangerous that they posed an immediate threat to global security. These weapons, the world was told, could be deployed within minutes. They could be handed to terrorists. They could strike without warning. The claim was repeated in speeches, press briefings, intelligence reports, and televised addresses, until it hardened into perceived truth. But the war that followed was not built on confirmed facts. It was built on a lie, or more precisely, on intelligence that was unverified, exaggerated, selectively presented, and in critical cases, completely false. The roots of this deception stretch back more than a decade before the invasion. After the 1991 Gulf War, Iraq was placed under strict international sanctions and weapons inspections overseen by the United Nations. Inspectors were tasked with locating and destroying any remaining weapons of mass destruction. Throughout the 1990s, inspection teams dismantled chemical facilities, destroyed missiles, and monitored Iraqi weapons programs. By the late 1990s, many experts believe Iraq's ability to produce or deploy such weapons had been largely neutralized. However, tensions remain high. Saddam Hussein's regime was secretive, uncooperative at times, and hostile toward Western powers. This opacity created suspicion, and suspicion slowly replaced evidence. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, fear transformed global politics. The United States entered a new era of security anxiety, where worst-case scenarios were treated as imminent threats. In this climate, Iraq was increasingly framed as part of a broader danger. Despite no proven link between Saddam Hussein and the 9/11 attacks, the idea that Iraq could supply terrorists with weapons of mass destruction took hold. Intelligence agencies were pressured to assess threats quickly, and ambiguous data began to be interpreted in the most alarming way possible. In late 2002 and early 2003, U.S. and allied officials made their case to the world. The most famous presentation came in February 2003, when U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell addressed the United Nations Security Council. Holding up diagrams, satellite images, and intercepted communications, Powell described mobile biological weapons labs, secret chemical stockpiles, and active nuclear ambitions. The presentation was delivered with authority and gravity, and it convinced many governments and citizens that the evidence was solid. What was not disclosed was how fragile much of that evidence actually was. Key intelligence claims were based on unreliable sources. One of the most damaging was testimony from an Iraqi defector known by the code name Curveball, who claimed Iraq was operating mobile biological weapons facilities. His statements were never independently verified, and later investigations revealed that his information was fabricated. Other claims, such as Iraq seeking uranium from Africa to restart a nuclear program, were based on forged documents that experts had already identified as fake before the war began. Internal dissent within intelligence agencies was downplayed or ignored, while uncertain data was presented as definitive proof. At the same time, United Nations weapons inspectors were back on the ground in Iraq. Led by Hans Blix and Mohammed El-Baradei, inspection teams reported that they had found no evidence of active weapons of mass destruction programs. They requested more time to complete their work, stating that inspections were making progress and that unresolved questions did not equal confirmed threats. These findings conflicted with the narrative being promoted by war advocates, but they were overshadowed by the urgency of political messaging. Despite widespread public protests and opposition from several major countries, the invasion moved forward. On March 20, 2003, coalition forces entered Iraq. The war was presented as a necessary act of preemptive defense, framed as a mission to disarm a dangerous regime and protect the world from catastrophic weapons. Baghdad fell within weeks, and Saddam Hussein's government collapsed. But as the dust settled, the central promise of the war remained unfulfilled. No weapons of mass destruction were found. Search teams scoured the country for months, then years. They investigated suspected facilities, interviewed scientists, and examined documents. The conclusion was unavoidable. Iraq did not possess stockpiles of chemical or biological weapons at the time of the invasion, nor did it have an active nuclear weapons program. In 2004, the Iraq Survey Group officially confirmed that the core justification for the war was wrong. The weapons that had been described as an imminent threat simply did not exist. The consequences of this lie were devastating. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians lost their lives as violence spread across the country. Infrastructure collapsed, basic services failed, and millions were displaced from their homes. The power vacuum created by the invasion fueled sectarian conflict and insurgency, destabilizing the region for years to come. Armed groups emerged from the chaos, some of which would later evolve into global security threats. What was presented as a war to make the world safer instead unleashed long-term instability. For the soldiers sent to fight, the cost was equally severe. Thousands were killed, tens of thousands were wounded, and countless others returned home with lasting physical and psychological trauma. Families were changed forever, all in service of a mission that had been justified by information that was later proven false. The trust between governments and citizens suffered a deep and lasting fracture. In the years that followed, investigations attempted to explain how such a monumental failure occurred. Official inquiries in the United States and the United Kingdom acknowledged serious flaws in intelligence assessment and decision-making. Reports concluded that evidence had been overstated, uncertainties had been minimized, and warnings had not been adequately communicated. While some officials expressed regret, accountability remained limited. No weapons were found, yet the architects of the war largely avoided consequences proportionate to the damage caused. The Iraq War stands as one of the most significant examples of how misinformation, fear, and political agendas can combine to produce catastrophic outcomes. It demonstrates how a lie does not always appear as a single false statement, but as a chain of exaggerations, omissions, and assumptions that are repeated until they become accepted truth. Once that truth is embedded in public consciousness, reversing it becomes almost impossible, even when evidence points in the opposite direction. History shows that wars rarely begin with honesty. They begin with narratives crafted to justify action, to simplify complex realities, and to mobilize public support. In the case of Iraq, the narrative was built on weapons that were never there, on threats that were never imminent, and on certainty that never existed. The war began because of a lie, and its consequences continue to echo through global politics, regional instability, and the collective memory of a world that learned, too late, the cost of believing without proof. As time passes, the Iraq War serves as a warning etched into modern history. It reminds us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, that skepticism is not weakness, and that truth, when ignored, demands a far higher price than doubt ever could.
History remembers wars by their battles, but rarely by the lies that started them. The Iraq War reminds us that unchecked claims can cost millions of lives. This is Truth with Smith, and the truth always matters.